This virus is dangerous. This virus is public enemy number one.
Insane! This is insane!
5 Singaporeans are quarantined on board the beleaguered Diamond Princess cruise ship Japan.
Whether you call it the coronavirus or COVID-19, the global pandemic undoubtedly dominated news headlines worldwide in 2020. And it's still doing so. Millions have been infected and about 1 million have lost their lives.
It is a very transmissible virus, or rather, I think it is very clever virus. And infected individuals, even without them developing symptoms, they can carry the virus in high quantity and able to transmit the virus very effectively to another human being. And that's the reason why it's spreading so quickly.
In Asia, China recorded the first cases in the region, with Wuhan emerging as the epicenter of the first major outbreak. It quickly escalated worldwide. Cities went into lockdown, social distancing restrictions of varying degrees swiftly imposed. Singapore, for example, introduced the circuit breaker, while neighbouring Malaysia imposed the movement control order. From Sydney, Australia to Sao Paulo in Brazil, we are all feeling the impact of the virus, which has gripped the globe since the start of the year.
This is a devil that everybody should fight.
It matters. Facts matter. Accuracy matters. Objectivity matters. Fairness matters. Balance matters. Accountability matters. Equality matters. History matters. News matters. Your view. Your future. Your world. It matters.
Hello everyone, depending on where you are, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. And of course, a very, very happy World News Day. Welcome to the World News Day webinar presented by the Straits Times, the World Editors Forum in partnership with the Singapore Press Club, National Youth Achievement Awards Council, as well as the Singapore University of Social Sciences. I am Yo Sam Jo, multimedia correspondent with the Straits Times, and I will be your host for today. Now, World News Day is a day to celebrate the positive impact of professional journalism on communities around the world. So no matter where you are around the globe, you could be in Manila, you could be in Singapore, in London, or in Jakarta, World News Day raises the awareness of the critical role that journalists play, not only in providing the public with credible and reliable news, but also in helping everyone make sense of and hopefully improve our rapidly changing world. Today is also, of course, it's September 28, which also happens to be UNESCO's International Day for Access to Information. And in this information age, this couldn't be more apt, especially in a COVID-19 world where we are plagued with bogus remedies, misinformation, rumors, and conspiracy theories. So today we have two very interesting panel discussions that will dive into how journalists are tackling the pandemic, the accompanying infodemic, and how everyone can contribute. But first, here to give a warm welcome and to kick things off officially, it's the president of the World Editors Forum, the editor of the Straits Times, and editor-in-chief of Singapore Press Holdings, English, Malay, Tamil Media, Mr. Warren Fernandez. Warren, please.
Thank you, Sam, and happy World News Day to you as well. Let me just welcome everybody to the program. for joining us on the World News Day show, which is organized by the Straits Times and the World Editors Forum, with a lot of great help from our partners, the National Youth Achievement Awards Council, the Singapore University of Social Services, the Singapore Press Club. And they've all come together to help make this happen, and we are really grateful. And we thank you as well for taking time to be with us. World News Day is an exciting event for us because for the first time, we have more than 150 newsrooms from around the world coming together for this event. And we see this event as something which we are building because it started 3 years ago by our Canadian counterparts. And last year, my colleagues and I in Asia brought it to Asia, and we managed to get 40 newsrooms to come together. And so now to see more than 150 newsrooms standing together for World News Day is really a phenomenal event. And so we're very glad you can join us for it. Now, you might ask us, why are we doing this? And the answer is really quite simple. We think the world around us is getting more and more complex, and it's fast moving and it's fast changing. And I think all of us could do with a little bit of help sort of figuring things out and staying on top of developments, of separating the facts from the fiction, of helping to join the dots and sort of interpreting where we are today and where things are moving tomorrow. And I think especially in the COVID-19 situation that we are in now, this becomes absolutely critical. We've just passed the milestone of 1 million deaths, and experts say it might get to 2 million before we even find a vaccine. So I think many of us in the audiences are looking for answers and trying to make sense of what this means for our lives and our livelihoods. How do we stay safe? How do we secure our jobs? And I think part of the solution has to be good, credible information to help people make sense of what's going on and stay safe and stay secure. And that's when newsrooms have to step up. We have to help audiences make sense of what's going on around them and join the dots for them so that they can understand and they can also decide what needs to be done for themselves and their families. And this is so important to the health and well-being of our society so that we can have meaningful discussions about what to do today, as well as how to grapple with the big challenges that we have to deal with in the next few months, as well as in the post-COVID-19 situation. So that's really why we wanted to do it, to make the case for good journalism. And we thought the best way to do that is really just to show everyone what we do, how we do it, and why we do it, and why it matters so much to the health and well-being of our societies. Because good journalism is neither free nor does it come cheap. To get information, to get to the truth, it needs time, it needs resources, it needs a lot of commitment and effort. And we want to make the case to support and secure our newsrooms for the future. So that's what it's really all about, good, credible journalism and how to secure that for the future. So 150 newsrooms have come together to do that today. And you would have seen the collaboration in the pages of the Straits Times today. We had a 10-page special report pulling together from content from all around the world. You will see it on our website and our app. And you have this session today for us to get into some of the issues where we discuss it. And then this evening at 8 p.m., you will see a special video presentation of what World News Day means and how newsrooms around the world have covered the pandemic over the last few months. So if you haven't already marked that out, please join us on the Straits Times website at 8 p.m. or our YouTube or Facebook channel. And that will bring together the whole story about World News Day today. After we've finished, we will hand over to our colleagues in Europe and the Middle East, and then finally to our colleagues in Canada. So World News Day will play out across the planet, across newsrooms and across time zones, right through September 28th as we mark this very, very important day, World News Day. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Warren. Yes, of course, a lot more on the importance of credible information in this time, this very troubling time in the COVID-19 pandemic. But let's jump right into our first discussion, shall we? Okay, we've assembled some of Asia's best journalists, with us here today for this webinar to discuss the perils of misinformation, rumors, and conspiracy theories. Of course, we'll be taking questions right after this. So if you have any questions in the meantime, you want to ask anything, be sure to use the Q&A function. You would see it somewhere below your screen. We see about over 200 of you all have joined us, so welcome once again. Now, here to lead our first discussion is Ms. Shafali Reki, editor of Asian Insider. Asian Insider, of course, is a Straits Times platform that strives to provide independent insider insights on Asia. Shafali also anchors ST's International Media Partnerships and the annual World News Day initiative. So let's give it up for Shafali.
Thanks, Sam. That was wonderful. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this webinar today on COVID-19, how you can contribute. We have a lot to discuss today, and we're going to be essentially tackling the problem of the infodemic and how it's coming in the way of all our efforts to fight the pandemic. The one thing that we shouldn't forget is we still don't have a vaccine, and it's quite likely going to be 2021 before we have one. So I'm going to begin with a definition of the infodemic so that we're all on the same page. And then I'm going to set the backdrop for discussions and invite all my three colleagues to join us here. So this is how the World Health Organization defines an infodemic. It is an overabundance of information, both online and offline. It includes deliberate attempts to disseminate wrong information, to undermine the public health response and advance alternative agendas of groups or individuals. Just the words of this definition tells you how serious the problem really is. Now, both the UN and WHO, since the beginning of this year, have been repeatedly trying to draw attention to this issue. In fact, just last week, they issued a statement urging everyone to come together and step up measures to fight the infodemic. There was one sentence there that really caught my attention, and it was like, technology is what is going to be keeping the virus alive, and we've got to be paying a lot of attention to what's going on. You know, that's such a complex issue because we need technology to be able to spread accurate information, to get across to people on their smartphones, people who live beyond borders, who are still trying to make sense of all the scientific developments that is going on. And yet it is this very technology that is being exploited for all the misinformation and rumors that are going on. So there was this interesting study done by the American Journal of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene. And they went into like, what is the misinformation out there? And if you study the data, you realize another complex phenomenon. So all the areas where we need information, which is about the disease, the transmission, the treatments, the cures, in all of these areas, there's lots of misinformation out there. In fact, what they did is they caught this one particular misinformation and decided to track, okay, what are the consequences of it? So this misinformation basically said that if you have high concentration of alcohol, and then you can kill the virus. Now, as a result of that, there were about 800 people who lost their lives. Nearly 6,000 people had to be hospitalized and 60 people became blind. So it just tells you like, this is such a serious issue. There is so much misinformation out there and the consequences are numerous, but we're going to be discussing all of that in detail. The key point I want to draw your attention to is that it endangers all the efforts of countries to be able to fight the pandemic. And we are, as we all know now, like we're living in a world where if you have coronavirus in one particular spot, it can spread all around the world. So a lot of effort is going on everywhere to bring different stakeholders together to be able to tackle this issue. And our second panel today is going to be going into this in much greater detail. But for here now, I have three of my colleagues joining in for this particular session. Allow me to introduce Tama Salim, my colleague from Indonesia. He is the world desk editor at the Jakarta Post, Indonesia's largest read English daily. We have Pam Brances from the Manila Bulletin, who has a very interesting story to share about how she actually joined this profession to fight misinformation. So we're looking forward to hearing from her. And we have my colleague from the Straits Times, Zakir Hussain, who's our Singapore editor. And he's been helping to oversee our coverage right from when it started, Jan 23. So let me start with Tama first. Tama, how's it going in Indonesia? We've been hearing some very worrying stories and trends, and the numbers still don't look. Could you give us a sense of where we are?
Yeah, sure. I think, first of all, Happy News Day, World News Day for everyone. So basically, the situation in Indonesia is quite worrying, both in terms of the pandemic response and the infodemic, as you put it. I would like to make an observation using that one point that I'd like to make, which is Indonesia must amp its testing so that the COVID response can be more reliable. This is so because yesterday was actually the first time in the past week that new recorded cases of COVID-19 dipped below 4,000 cases per day. 4,000 cases per day in the past week. And the only other country in Southeast Asia with nearly as many cases per day is actually the Philippines, where my colleague Pam is from. And their count did not even pass the 3,000 case mark. So just to give you a bit of an idea, Indonesia has more than 275,000 confirmed cases and over 10,000 deaths, while the Philippines has over 300,000 cases, but just half as many deaths. So what's extraordinary about this fact is that the scale of Indonesia's testing still lags behind even countries under similar circumstances. As of September 24, Indonesia logged 111 daily tests per 1 million people, with nearly 16 daily confirmed cases per 1 million people. The Philippines, in contrast, has logged 312 daily tests per 1 million people. That's almost 3 times as many. And they have nearly 26 daily confirmed cases per 1 million people. So just used as an indication, it pretty much means that Indonesia might actually have much more cases to contend with if only more testing was done. My point here is that not one country can fashion an appropriate response if it does not have the accurate data. And without testing, there is no data. So how does this look in the real world? The Indonesian government has, as a result, this tendency to favor the economic recovery process, and as a result has tried to mold most of its public messages to suit this priority. It has lost some credibility among the educated sections of the population, but is trying to sway the others to avoid mass panic. We had one doctor resign from the National Task Force, this past week over concerns of testing. So I'm saying that at times, not even the government is a reliable source of information, which is why so many movements have appeared in the grassroots. That's not to say that the government hasn't been doing its job. It's perhaps more apt to say that it is currently lost in translation, not knowing what to prioritize. So my second point is, while senior officials are drumming up the prospects of a vaccine candidate that's actually still in the making, misinformation creeps into the vacant spaces that are lacking attention by the government. Both officials and quote-unquote experts have peddled so much nonsense. I believe you may have heard what is going on. We have eucalyptus necklaces to ward off the virus. We have concoctions that are basically black market remedies that are peddled by even military sources. So there's so much information there. And this kind of information has resulted in even like social media influencers and their tens of thousands of followers falling victim. And I think the one thing that describes this well is that there is a result of a survey, my clinic Misinformasi, that says that 9 out of 10 Indonesians surveyed have fallen victim to misinformation. And the most misinformed age groups are over 54 and children up to the age of 17. So there is a lot of misinformation going on in Indonesia. I think I can stop there. Thanks.
Absolutely. I mean, just listening to you, there are so many things in there that I want to know so much more about. But I think part of the problem is that this issue is so complex. And while everyone is trying their best to make communication effective, we're all actually still trying to understand COVID-19 itself and its larger implications. Also, I suppose in big countries such as Indonesia, it's very difficult to control the movement of people and to enforce rules and regulations. What do you say?
That's absolutely correct. We have to remember that Indonesia is a country of 260 something million people, and the government has its work cut out for it. So the flow of information definitely needs to be conveyed in a way that is reliable but also accessible as well. And this is mostly the challenge of what the government is facing now. And there are many other, sections such as, the medical practitioners that want to help out, but there's only so much someone can process, even from the government, and they have to pick and choose, and they have to prioritize, and so that has inevitably led to most of what we see as this misinformation, I think.
Tell me, is language also an issue in Indonesia? I mean, you have people who speak different dialects. So does that complicate the whole process of not only control of the pandemic, but even making people understand the simple things that they ought to be doing so that a larger population is safe?
I think to an extent with Indonesia, you can safely kind of divide the population between the urban population and the rural population. And so I think for the most part, language is not a barrier, but the access to the information is more a barrier to this. And so the people who are maybe, they have different dialects, they have different languages even, trying to process the same information that comes out of the urban centers, but is then relayed with variations into the regions, then that becomes the challenge here. And I believe that the government, the central government, has invited the regional governments to come together and ensure that there's a more reliable information being circulated. But of course, it has many drawbacks. It has, there are lots of things that still need to be worked up on. So, yeah.
Yeah, we'll be listening to more of that later, but access to information is a good point you brought up. I'd like to turn to my colleague, Pam from the Philippines. And Pam, do share with us, how you've been trying to ensure that accurate information goes out through the various platforms that are there. And also, I want to draw your attention to all the stories we're getting from Philippines, where it's been a really challenging time for the media in your country.
Well, in the Philippines, for one, misinformation has always been a problem, but since the pandemic happened, it spread like wildfire, especially on social media. So we are a newspaper first company, but then we brought everything digitally because it's a better way to access, to give people access to information. So the way that we've been doing it, number one, we're still doing what traditional media journalism should do, and then majority of the part we try to understand the behavior of our audience on social media and how they consume information, because we do believe in our newsroom that communication is a two-way street. So it is better to understand how they consume information so that we can talk to them in a sense that they would understand us as well, because we can't continue on barging them with information and then they don't understand it at all. So we try our best to do articles that are very simple, easier to consume, shorter, especially on social media, because everyone there has very short attention span. So, and you can't, if you are in a crisis like this, you don't have time to research for terms that you don't understand. Sometimes scientific terms will make people lose their attention or just be not interested at all because they don't understand. Not because they are not smart enough. It's because they don't have time, because we all have our lives and like that. So we need to understand their behavior to better communicate with them, so that it's easier for both of us to understand each other. That's we prioritize communication more than just sharing information, so that we will know what they don't know and we will tell them what we know, so that in that way we can help each other.
Are you satisfied with all your efforts? Do you feel that finally a lot of accurate information has gone around, or is the situation still very, very complex?
There are a lot of people in the Philippines. Well, Indonesia is twice as much as we are, but it's an everyday task. It's not something that I can say that we are doing enough. It's a continuous process. And I know that tomorrow could be another day of a new fake news, false news that we need to debunk. But it's a continuous process. So I don't want to sugarcoat that we are doing enough. But I'm sure that consistency is going to be the key to solve this. So there.
Absolutely. I'm going to turn to my colleague Zakir. We're both in the Straits Times, and Zakir, as you well know, Singapore was cited as one of the first countries which had the pandemic in control. But thereafter, we saw a surge. It's over 50,000 cases now. So as a journalist, how did you feel? And what role did misinformation play in all of this?
Hi. I think misinformation was, although there was a good flow of information from the authorities and official sources after the initial period, daily cases were reported almost religiously every evening and so on. It was over WhatsApp and through informal social media channels that quite a bit of misinformation was spread. For instance, that, certain places had seen a surge in cases, or that, for instance, when Singapore entered a partial lockdown due to the surge in cases in migrant worker dorms, there were reports of authorities, actually stopping vehicles and conducting roadblocks just to find out people who were breaking the rules when actually these were not happening. Although it didn't kind of, alter behavior so much, I think some of this had the effect of chipping away at, creating an atmosphere of almost alarm. And I think that might have exacerbated, panic and anxiety among some of these situations. And I think one area where fake news or misinformation spread quite rapidly was among migrant worker communities themselves, because they didn't understand or didn't have access to information in their own languages initially. There was a bit of panic and anxiety, and you saw some workers or patients actually being freaked out almost by the fact that they had COVID, when actually over time, I think it wasn't as lethal once things were under control.
Right. Now, Zakir, throughout this period, we in the newsroom also came across instances of misinformation. Like, I do know of some measures, but what do you want to tell our audience of some of the special efforts we put in to ensure that accurate information did go out to our readers?
So one of the channels we've had for some time was this method called Ask ST, where readers and viewers can write in or send in messages. And what journalists do is then be the intermediary. So we approach experts, we draw on our sources, as well as try and explain some of these issues to readers in an easy to understand format. And I think we still continue to do that, even as the number of cases sees a dip, but as, there's constant concern about the resurgence of the virus here.
So as an editor and a journalist, as you were going, just witnessing on a daily basis the surge in cases, what was going on in your mind? Should we have, doubled our capacity, or what was it that was lacking?
It's tough. I remember very early on when the number of cases was still fairly low. There were voices, concerns that were aired about, say, should we continue to do more to make sure that areas where should close, there were calls for schools to be closed early. There were calls for migrant worker dorms to be, monitored, for workers to be isolated and so on. And I think it was the decision every society had to make. And we ourselves in the newsroom were divided. Should we push for more to be done on this front, or should we kind of look for the facts and try and assess some of the issues dispassionately? In hindsight, maybe we could have done some things differently, but I think we tried to reflect various concerns and points of view fairly, all things considered.
So all of us here have actually spent quite many years in this profession. So do you get the feeling that COVID-19 has actually increased the importance of our profession? And do you see a shift happening in terms of our priority mission? Somewhere I get the feeling that our current focus should really be on just giving accurate information. We do different kinds of journalism. We do investigative journalism. There's, all kinds of journalism going on. But right now, that seems to be the key priority. What do you say?
I think I don't see a disconnect between the two. I think investigative journalism will continue to be important. I think there have been cases where lapses have occurred and so on. But at the same time, I think accuracy of information is also paramount. Maybe COVID-19, I think it's cast a spotlight on one area. I think explanatory journalism, hasn't been given the focus it has. And I think at a time when we're dealing with quite a number of complex issues regarding the transmission of disease and some of the various views on this, and even as more talk of vaccines comes on, I think explanatory journalism has a role to play.
I think that's a very good point. In fact, what was crossing my mind is that together with explanatory journalism, I think COVID-19 is forcing us to rely more and more on experts in the field to draw out information for them, because the demand for accurate information seems to be going up. Tama and Pam, I'd like to hear your views too. How's it playing out in Indonesia and Philippines?
Well, I think if we look to your first question about how it has made our industry more relevant, it definitely has. One thing I tell to our reporters is that we have to provide relevant and accurate information to the people to remain informed. But also there is an acknowledgement, I think, that we cannot know everything there is to know about COVID, not yet at least. So as Zakir mentioned, yes, the explanatory journalism is something that will be key in informing our readership and our audience, a wider audience. But for this gap in information, I think, especially in Indonesia, where there's quite a significant gap of information, we have our work cut out for us, basically. And so that's why we keep to the stories that matter, show how the pandemic or the response thereof is affecting people's lives. And that I think is what we're doing a lot at the Post.
Okay, so in the Philippines, sorry, were you going to say something? Okay, so here in the Philippines, I think with regards to your first question, I think our profession has always been that important, especially here because our country is very active in terms of politics issues. So we've always been there, but then since COVID happened, I think they've appreciated us more, and now they listen to us better because we have the tools that not everyone has the access to. That's why they rely on us more now. And in terms of accurate information, investigative journalism and all, in our newsroom, we practice, especially me, I lead a team for digital journalism. So sometimes it's important to put out information first. We understand that, but our working ethics in our newsroom is to provide accurate information first. Because it's better to read something accurate the first time instead of correcting it after, because we want to prevent the failure of falling into misinformation and being labeled as someone who shares fake news on social media. So that's how it is for us. But recently we created a team which does story for explains topics so that people can understand certain topics better, like what is COVID, what are some of the claims that people create that can cure COVID and stuff like that. We compile it. It's like it's an explanatory journalism as well. But yeah, it just started, and most of the newsroom here in the Philippines have been doing that. So it's a collective effort between all the media outlets right now here in our country.
Great. I'm going to turn to my colleague Sam Cho now to ask if any of the questions have started coming in from our readers. We'd like everyone here to respond to that as well.
Well, we are in luck. We actually have quite a few questions that have streamed in. Again, if you want to ask Shafali or our panelists any questions, please use the Q&A function. You should find it somewhere at the bottom of your screen. All right. I have two related questions here. One is from Masaki Mitsuhashi, as well as another from Cheryl Lee. And Masaki Mitsuhashi is asking, how do you battle fake news when people only listen and prefer to listen only if it's convenient for them? And Cheryl is asking, we understand how, in today's Most of us today receive news through digital platforms, right? So how might we get news outside of our echo chamber algorithm to get a better view of the situation, especially with all the noise that may be untrue from within our existing circles?
Very interesting question, I must say. I mean, Zakir, would you like to have a go at this?
I think, gosh, it's a tough one. I think you've got to deliver the news to readers in a platform they're familiar with, and in some cases it could be through push notifications or direct WhatsApp messages. But I think there's no shortcut for trying to package the news in an informative, powerful way that shocks people and makes them sit up and see the facts, I guess. And I think one of the cases we did was, I think, stories that describe what COVID does to your organs, how COVID affects, how lethal, stories that tell maybe through graphics, through visuals, through video, how dramatic COVID's effects are. And I think some of these I think if you've got a good story, folks will share it on their networks and, with their family and friends. And I think we've seen some of that because some of the stories that are more graphic or more shocking or that recount COVID survivors' tales actually do much better, especially on social media.
Yes, I think so. I mean, the closer you get to the real situation, more information starts flowing that you can begin to share. And that itself appears so much more convincing. But Pam, how's the scene in Philippines? This must be a big challenge for media in Philippines.
Yeah, well, just to address Basaki's question, he asked when people only listen and prefer to listen. Well, the thing is, there's no one answer to that question because, as I've mentioned before, that communication should be between two people. So if you understand how they want to communicate, then you can probably do some make a way to better communicate with them. Because that's our job as a journalist. We need to try to repackage our information to cater to different type of people who will consume the information that we serve them. So it's never gonna be one answer for that because people will always have their preference. But you have to be there, whichever preference they have, so that everyone can have access to information. It's your job. You have to do it every day and continuously create ways and process to better communicate with your audience. So whatever you prefer, I have to be there. I have to learn how to be there. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. You have to get onto different platforms to convey that message so that, the same message is coming. Sometimes the human mind is such that it needs to see the same message echoing, so then it begins to absorb it. But Tama, from Jakarta, do you face this issue as well, where of echo chambers and people not entirely listening to the information that is accurate?
Definitely. I think the one thing that going for the Indonesian news industry, I suppose, is that we have so many outlets and we have so many actually veritable outlets, reliable outlets. So instead of thinking in the way where we think, oh yes, we have, it's a zero-sum game where, one media outlet, gets a scoop over the other. We've actually come together more as, as media companies. We've actually collaborated more in order to be able to amplify the facts that need to be circulated. So, and of course, with that, we also always try to kind of give the readership, the audience, the information, first of all, that they can consume if they want to or not, but we also tell them that there's that a good mix of resources is always your best bet. So we're not actually playing against each other in this sense. Some media companies in Indonesia are better equipped to do the fact checking, so people will look into that. We will, gladly share or direct someone in that direction if they have that, and then that will kind of get around that echo chamber. And what happens is a much more collaborative experience, I think, in Indonesia. And we've had a few partnerships that have helped kind of bring this around.
Yeah, I think no other time demanded collaboration as much as in these COVID-19 times. And I, the point that you made about amplifying the facts that are accurate, I think we have a lot more to do today, but I'm going to try and see if we can squeeze in 1 or 2 more questions from our readers, since we have quite a few people who've signed up.
Yes, certainly. We actually have quite a few questions from secondary school students in Hong Kong. Hello. So quite a few of you are asking how to spot and prevent the spread of fake news. And in particular, we have a student by the name of Yang Jiaping from Yuan Long Catholic Secondary School. Jiaping is asking, from the perspective of journalists, with such a massive amount of information swirling around, how do you ensure their accountability as well as value in reporting to the public? I guess Jiaping is asking, how do you pick out information that is accurate?
Yeah, one of the first things to do, Jiaping, is to go to credible media. So credible media, really, legacy media, traditional newsrooms, we spend a lot of time fact-checking before the information is put out for the public. But all of us are journalists, and since time is short, I'm going to give all my colleagues a chance to answer some of the fact-checking efforts we're putting in.
I think there's no shortcut to just verifying the information. And I think one tip is, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably, if something, a piece of information sounds too unbelievable, like, drinking a substance can cure COVID, then it probably is fake.
Right. Tama, how would you like to address this question? Like, how do students go around checking fake news? What are some of the easy things they can, watch out for, so it's easier for them?
Okay. Thanks, Shefali. I think more to my point about collaborative journalism, it's always a good idea to actually fact check the one information that you're looking at across a few legacy media or reliable media in that sense. And sure enough, there will be, I suppose, the information won't differ too much if it is actually accurate or accurately portrayed. So again, I would always advise students to have a good mix of media outlets that they read up on. And so it's always going to be a practice on a case-by-case basis. But you can always, I think, go away with the fact that, like, anything that isn't being peddled by experts through the media, then you have every reason to doubt it.
Yeah, there are some good points in there that you might want to hold on to, which is look at more news on that very issue to make up your own mind on whether it's credible. Then you might want to look at the links that the writer is providing. That will also give you a sense of whether the news that you're reading is real or fake news. And there are several other ways, and we can go into this in detail, but Philippines is a country where smartphones is so everyone almost has a smartphone. So Pam, would you want to offer some suggestions on that question?
Okay, so for students, for starters, you need to have a list of media outlets that you trust or you want to follow, and then you check their news sites if you want to find out certain information about something. But my editor has always advised everyone in our newsroom to double source. If you've read something from this particular media outlet, even if they are credible, you can always check another media outlet just to verify, double source. At the same time, it doesn't just only help you verify a story, it also could give you a different angle or a detail that the other news outlet missed out on. So it won't hurt to read more about that topic from different news outlets, because it's always better to read a story from different angles. So you need to have a certain list of news outlets that you trust, and then you rely on them. But don't just trust one, trust multiple, just to be sure. Just to be sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel we're just about warming up, and let me ask my colleagues, is there time for us to take one more question, or are we? Okay, so it looks like we've exceeded our time. We really have to make way for the rest of the program. I'm going to end our discussions now, but we're going to be making a record of your questions. And through our publications, we'll try and see if we can continue to answer some of the ones that would interest a wider audience through our collective efforts. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
I'll hand over to Sam now.
Thank you so much, Shafali, Tama, Pam, and Zakir. Thank you so much for the insightful discussion. If you have more questions, I'm sure you can reach out to our panelists directly, or you could email them. I'm sure their social medias are out there. So yeah, do that. Now, the ongoing pandemic, has been such a harrowing experience for so many of us, to say the least. But as the saying goes, every cloud has a silver lining. And fortunately, it has brought out some of the best in some of us, and proven that not all heroes wear capes. Now, before we move on to our next discussion, here's a short video by the National Youth Achievement Awards Council and the Singapore University of Social Sciences about young changemakers who have improved the plight of those affected by COVID-19. Let's take a look.
Hello everyone, my name is Darren So and I'm a photographer. It all started in April when the cases in the migrant worker dormitories was getting really bad. And as a creative person, as a photographer, I was feeling really a little bit helpless. So I spoke to Emmeline from Objectives, Center for Photography and Film, and we decided that we could try and do a fundraising. We decided that we were going to ask a few other photographer friends of ours to see if they were willing to chip in to donate their images as prints to be sold. I called a few people, Ai Bing Chia, Gareth Phua, Nikki Low, Mindy Tan, Tam Kok Leong, James Tan and Jimmy Sung. So together there were 8 photographers and we contributed a bunch of prints which we sold for between $80 to $500 each. At the end of 1 month, because of the amount of publicity that we got through the media as well as through word of mouth and each of our own friends, we actually managed to sell enough prints to raise nearly $60,000. So we're really grateful for everybody that came together for this worthwhile cause.
Today we are here to do the face shield project. This is designed for the educator by the educator. It will enhance the volume by 4 decibels while keeping the teachers and students safe. So this is how I sound like. After I put on the face shield, can you hear the difference?
Hi, my name is Cheryl, and I started a project called the Bad Day Meal. So the Bad Day Meal is a project where we share food with people who might need it. We wanted to ensure that even if you're having a bad day, we are able to provide a decent meal for you. We actually raise funds and support local hawkers by buying food from them and distribute the food to those in need.
The donation of a medical item to Harbin is for those frontline workers as hospital. as they needed help due to the lockdown. I'm pleased that the donated items could help hospital staff during the COVID-19 pandemic.
If you are wondering, what could you possibly do in a time of crisis like this, or this is one of the things that you could do, you'll be surprised at the amount of support that you can get when you rally together as a group with a good cause.
This virus is dangerous. This virus is public enemy number one.
Insane! This is insane!
5 Singaporeans are quarantined on board the beleaguered Diamond Princess cruise ship in Japan.
Whether you call it the coronavirus or COVID-19, the global pandemic undoubtedly dominated news headlines worldwide in 2020. And it's still doing so. Millions have been infected and about 1 million have lost their lives.
It is a very transmissible virus, or rather, I think it is very clever virus. And infected individuals, even without them developing symptoms, they can carry the virus in high quantity and able to transmit the virus very effectively to another human being. And that's the reason why it's spreading so quickly.
In Asia, China recorded the first cases in the region, with Wuhan emerging as the epicenter of the first major outbreak. It quickly escalated worldwide. Cities went into lockdown, social distancing restrictions of varying degrees swiftly imposed. Singapore, for example, introduced the circuit breaker, while neighbouring Malaysia imposed the movement control order. From Sydney, Australia to Sao Paulo in Brazil, we are all feeling the impact of the virus, which has gripped the globe since the start of the year.
This is a devil that everybody should fight.
Welcome back. Now, our earlier discussion touched a lot on the perils and problems arising from the COVID-19 pandemic. Our second panel will be addressing some of the possible solutions to these problems, and leading the discussion here with me in the room today is Mr. Viswa Salasivan, Chief Executive of Strategic Moves, a corporate leadership and strategy consulting practice. Now, Viswa is a former Singapore-nominated Member of Parliament. He started his career in broadcasting in the 1980s with the then Singapore Broadcasting Corporation and made his name as anchor presenter of popular current affairs programs like Feedback and Talking Point. We're so very grateful to have him with us here today. Please give a warm welcome to Viswa.
Thank you very much. I will definitely engage you as my publicist.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Welcome to the second webinar for today, World News Day. We are at an acute point in the frenetic 9 months of battling a pandemic that's turned our lives upside down. The world has passed the 1 million mark in terms of COVID deaths. You could say that we are at a point of inflection. The steps we take now or don't take will determine at a global level and at the national level whether we will come out of the situation. And even if we do come out, in what form? We are seeing hope, reason to hope for vaccines. Yet this very hope is bringing out the worst in us. Despite global appeals by the United Nations and World Health Organization to pursue multilateral deals that provide for equitable distribution of vaccines, we are seeing multi-billion-dollar deal-making by national governments. It is estimated that in total, the deal-making by countries such as USA, UK, countries in the EU, Japan, and other rich nations would mean that these countries would have access to more than 50% of the vaccine doses that are available. And bear in mind that these countries comprise just over 10% of the global population. Looks like we have so quickly gone back to old habits, dashing hopes that COVID-19 has forced us to hit the proverbial reset button and changed our ways. History is a great teacher. it's quite evident that we are bad students. That's where World News Day comes in. It's a reminder, a timely reminder that we are citizens of a global community connected at the seams. We are a lot more interdependent than we care to admit. World News Day is a reminder that we as a collective, whether we are professionals, governments, NGOs, researchers, academics, very importantly, whether we are youth and journalists regardless of whether you are in the mainstream media or social media or digital media, we can be a formidable group when we stand shoulder to shoulder in our battle against COVID. For me, this is what is uniquely significant about today. It is a clarion call for collective action with each of us playing specific roles. Hence the topic, tackling COVID-19, getting it right, and how can you contribute? To help us get there, we have a panel comprising an academic, a renowned medical practitioner, a leader in the journalistic world, and me, the fourth panelist and discussion leader. Here are the panelists. Dr. June Tay, Head Digital Media Program, School of Science and Technology, Singapore University of Social Science, or SUSS. Professor Dale Fisher, Group Chief of Medicine. Okay, now we caught him, right? Why are you sitting so far from me, Dale?
That's where I was told to sit.
He's Group Chief of Medicine, National University Health System. He's also the chairperson of the steering committee for Global Outbreak Alert and Response Network, World Health Organization. Warren Fernandez, Editor-in-Chief, The Straits Times and Singapore Press Holdings, English, Malay and Tamil Media Group, and the President of the World Editors Forum. Without further ado, June, could you kick off with the opening statement?
Okay. The growth of digital economy is fueled by digital technology, which encompasses cloud computing, 5G mobile networks, Internet of Things, fintech, robotics, and artificial intelligence. Impact of COVID-19 actually amplifies the needs for a digital economy to restore economic and social disruptions. What are the digital economy risks and challenges? And that includes cybersecurity concerns and how to actually safeguard intellectual property and how to grow a workforce that actually meets the needs of a digital economy, and how to actually mitigate irregular contracts and short-term work concern. Digital economy also disrupt traditional sectors and may lead to job losses. There are also oligopoly concerns where few firms or countries may dominate certain sectors. And we have also, what if policies and governance are actually not moving fast enough? So for example, if we have autonomous vehicles knocking you down, who is going to be blamed? Who takes responsibilities when artificial intelligence fails? AI can do wonders, but AI also lack emotional intelligence and have limited creativity. All is not gloom. In developing digital economy, we have to leverage on human strength, and that should be creativity and emotional intelligence in order to create more compelling products and services. So what are the plus points of this digital economy? And that is actually to generate growth, achieve globalization with businesses going online, create more jobs in new sectors, for example, AI, quantum computing, fintech, and also allow small players to penetrate certain markets and get access to a larger group of consumers. So what are the opportunities in this pandemics? There's a big push to ensure resilience and efficiency of this enabling technology, and also to accelerate tech growth. COVID-19 has brought many small merchants into digital marketing and digital payment space. So we have property agent taking VR 360 images and videos to actually showcase clients' houses. And we see also durian sellers using live streaming to engage with their customers, cracking jokes. In fact, they are selling their personality. And we have also influencers marketing, which is actually very big and is driven actually by younger people with preferences for more authentic and unique approach in selling. So this pandemic has actually expedited the use of remote meeting tools like Zoom for meeting and learning, and also people are looking for even more immersive experience and exploring virtual reality environment for organizing conferences, trade fairs, and campus teaching. So we can see that in vibella.com. So more malls will also be popping up, virtual malls will be popping up online. So in the near future, it may be a norm for us to walk around in virtual shops in VR mode and able to see products in 3D. So internet actually levels the playing field for everyone. As long as you have the determination to learn and adapt, you can learn almost anything online and be a player within this digital economy chain.
Thank you. Thank you very much, June. What I pick up from what you said is that there are tremendous opportunities that the digital economy actually presents. But you also highlighted that the policy clock, so to speak, the policy decision-making process actually continues to lag the technology clock, right? Yeah. So technology being driven by commercial incentives, it's actually moving at breakneck speed. But we do need to pull the brakes from time to time. Mm-hmm. You know, that's where public policy comes in, and public policy is always lagging behind. And that is a cause of concern. Yes?
Yes, agree.
Right, thank you. Dale?
Thanks, Vishwa. Thanks for to everyone who invited me along. I guess I wanted my opening statement to be more about the media, because this is News Day, World News Day. I was met downstairs by some people to show me up to this meeting place, and they said, thank you for participating in the effort today. And my immediate response was, no, thank you for all you're doing for the response. Yeah. Who should be thanking who? Because when we look at outbreak response, we look at the pillars of an outbreak response. And communications is easily the least underrated consistently in outbreaks, whether you're doing a flu outbreak or a Ebola outbreak. It's always the one people think of last. And it's a big problem, and it's a big failing in general. So people always think of case management and infection prevention and control. People think of testing, people think of the epidemiology and the epi curves that we have to flatten and all these sort of things. We think about the logistics, the things people need, the physical materials. But that final pillar is always risk communications, community engagement. And if you get that wrong, this leads to a failed response. I just got a couple of pictures that I thought I'd show. When I was last in West Africa, I was surprised by this one that said Ebola is real. Of course it's real. But this was such an important message because the outbreak began in an area where the population, it was the opposition party in power then. So people are thinking it's a conspiracy. So this simple message, and then the next message, which is just what are the symptoms? Get them out there, whatever means are at your disposal. And of course, if you get them wrong, then you get the population can actually turn on the people that are trying to do the good work. And we all know of situations, whether it's the Red Cross or Médecins Sans Frontières, where the centers have been burned down, rocks have been thrown. And this is not because the population is a bad people. They don't understand. They're confused. Yeah. So this to me is the best part of World News Day for me as we enter or come towards the end of the first year of this pandemic, that we need to appreciate the importance of responsible media, accurate, timely, relevant, delivered in the right way, multimodal, crucial to how a country does.
Thanks, Dale. I mean, it looks as if you've been bribed by the guy sitting next to you.
They said I could keep my speech. They said I could keep the cup.
No, but it's wonderful to hear a medical practitioner such as you, actually highlighting the importance of communication. And communication is not just about the media. Communication is about everything,
Absolutely.
right? And the media plays an important role in communication, and that is underrated. I think it's very important that you highlighted that. It's also about trust, isn't it? It's also about who communicates. You know, if I don't trust you, and if I don't trust your credentials, why would I trust what you're trying to share with me? You know, I think that's very important.
So the people that share the information, they have to be a wide range of what you'd call influencers.
Yes.
And maybe that's a footballer, maybe it's a doctor, maybe it's a politician, but it has to be part of a strategy.
Absolutely. So that's a good point to move over to Warren.
Sure. I was thanking Dale for sort of coming here and also being very sort of helpful to my colleagues as we try to sort of communicate with the audience. And then he was thanking me back. So we seem to be in agreement on many things. But I wanted to say that, you know, COVID-19 has been the best of times and the worst of times for the media, because the audience is coming to us in numbers like we've never seen before. Yeah. So newsrooms all around the world are seeing a surge in audiences. And that, I think, speaks to the hunger for information, hunger for explanation, you know, separating fact from fiction, joining the dots. And that is all about the issue of credibility and trust that you were speaking to. And I think what we've been doing in the newsroom in the Straits Times is we've been investing in correspondence to build up their authoritativeness, their credibility over the years. So we've had people covering health and science and environment for many years now. And when a crisis like this breaks, they can then step up, and because they know the issues, they know the nuances, and they know the players, so they can get access to the experts. We have many people out there with lots of questions on their minds. And you know, when we opened up our Ask ST platform, we had thousands of people coming up to questions that you've probably been asked more times than you care to remember. You know, do I wear a mask? You know, how safe am I when I go out? But these are questions that they are worried about. And what we can do is seek out the experts and get them the answers they want. And I think that's where we not only build trust, but we build a confidence in us. So I think that's important for newsrooms to do and to keep investing in doing, because this is a long-term proposition. So in that sense, it's the best of times. It's ironical, though, that this is also the time when many newsrooms around the world, not here in Singapore, thankfully, but around the world, facing huge challenges. Yeah. In fact, for many newsrooms, it's an existential challenge because revenues have come down, resources have come down. So in that situation, how do you step up and play the role that you're being called upon to play? And this is especially a challenge for local newsrooms. And in some countries, local newsrooms have been depleted of resources, and they've formed news deserts, communities without a local newsroom to cover what's going on in the newsroom at town councils, state councils, school halls. And the studies have shown that when you do not have a newsroom which is dedicated to covering the local issues, accountability, governance, ability to deal with the crisis, all gets hit. So that's why we've decided to do World News Day across the planet, to make the case to audiences, stakeholders, community leaders, business leaders, governments, why having a credible media is so important to that whole process of public communication. You need good public information flowing out there. You need the experts. But to complete that circle, you need good, credible journalism as well.
So the word that comes to my mind is collaboration, right? And collaboration must be predicated on trust. I mean, and the media actually plays a very important role as an interlocutor, right? Interlocutor between various agencies, interlocutor between the medical fraternity and the public and the stakeholders, you know. But in order to play that role of an interlocutor, you need to come across as knowing what the business is, knowing what the issues are. And that's where investing in subject matter experts, in journalists, right? It's so important. And how many years does it take for a journalist to become a subject matter expert? For example, in the health beat.
Well, it takes a good number of years, pounding the beat, getting to know the subject.
And they remain in that beat for years?
Very often they do. Sometimes they move around from one beat to another so that they get that breadth of understanding. They understand the policy, they understand the finances, and then they come back to go deep into an issue. So you need a little bit of exposure, both to the breadth and the depth. And we've been building up, correspondence in housing, healthcare, transport.
For more than a decade,
for decades,
15
many
years.
decades. I mean, Salma
has been in the
health for
15 years.
She will hate me for telling you exactly how many years.
She started when she was 11.
Yeah, she's bribed you as well, I think.
I must say, we can also tell if a journalist is a subject matter expert.
Yes.
It's a much easier conversation. They understand it. And someone else who's just asking all the basics, and sometimes it's really.
Yeah. And this is where I think trust and credibility are flip sides of the same coin. You can't have trust if you don't have credibility as a journalist. So quality journalism, as you've highlighted again and again, is so critical, right? And today we are talking about trust and confidence. You see, you can have confidence in a particular system, which means that it's well-oiled, it's efficient, right? Like the SPH it's very efficient system, right? It doesn't mean that you automatically get the people's trust. Trust is about faith, it's about values, it's about integrity and issues like that. That's harder to earn with people. And once you lose the trust, whatever you say, I'm not going to believe you. Like what you said in Africa, right? If you don't trust the regime, even if they're doing the right thing, after some time you say, I don't believe you.
And actually, sometimes it was about pre-existing trust as well.
Yes.
But what you just said, you can actually see all over the world. There are countries where there was no pre-existing trust and they've really struggled through this. There are others where one side is saying it's unimportant, this outbreak, the other one saying it is. And of course, then the whole outbreak response becomes political.
Yes.
And it's very difficult to come back from that in September.
Yeah. So
I think you can't sort of switch trust on and off.
No.
You've got to be building it out in peacetime. So you have a store of goodwill. People know you understand the issues. They believe you. They have an affinity for the brand. They know the correspondence. So when you need to counter it, you have something in the bank.
Right. So, for example, if you didn't have trust and confidence, you can have the best hotline,
yes,
run efficiently, but nobody's going to call.
Precisely.
Right? That's the truth, So how important is this trust going forward between government and system and the people, between reporters and the people, and between the medical fraternity and the people? How important, how strong is it in the region, in the globe, in Singapore? Anyone?
It's everything.
How strong is it? How strong is it now?
Well, you notice it when you don't have it.
Yeah.
So in Singapore, you could well say, I don't see the issue. But you can look in other countries around the world that I don't need to name, and just say they're struggling because this is a community outbreak. So the people that need to respond to it is the community. This is not going to be solved by politicians and health workers. It's the community that needs to hear the messages, get the buy-in, and be part of the response. If you don't have that, then you've just got politicians arguing, healthcare workers saying you have to do this or nobody's doing it. And in most of these other countries where there's no understanding of whether you should wear a mask or not.
Yeah, and that brings me to the question about data. Data, accurate data, and analysis of the data, metadata, has never been more important because it's just a deluge of information that's flowing all over the place. People want to see the wood for the trees. People want help more than ever before. So as a person involved in the digital space, how important is the collection of data, the distribution of data, and the analysis of data?
Yeah, the collection of data is actually very important. Actually, many companies these days, they collect a huge, enormous amount of data. But whether this is actually necessary, you see, so if a lot of data are being collected, who is going to actually keep track of the data, how these data are being used? So it can be very dangerous, you see. So I think if you have watched The Social Dilemma, they actually say that you should text people.
It's a documentary.
It's a documentary on Netflix. You should actually
I would recommend everyone to watch this.
You should text people who collect data. The more they collect, the more you actually text them. So they have to think carefully what kind of data they actually collect. And
it's like the carbon credit, right? That the more you use, you have to pay because because you can misabuse it.
Yes, because many of them, they actually collect the data. They need to collect data. Like, for example, you use social media, they need to actually measure how many times you click on certain video, certain image, and they know a lot about you. And then they need to measure what is the growth, what is the level of engagement. Okay, so all this can be highly dangerous. How they are going to use this data.
Sorry, June, it's also about exploiting people's vulnerabilities, isn't it?
Yes.
This is a time during COVID when people are more willing to share the information because they believe that it's going to be used correctly.
Yeah.
And people are sharing a lot more information so that we can collectively find solutions. But if then, how do you make sure that that information that's being provided with trust is not abused?
Yeah, that's the problem.
But how do we make sure that it's not abused?
I think we can perhaps make use of blockchain to actually combat all this fake news. There should be more regulation, and there should be a blockchain where credible newsmaker can come together, and then for every fake news and try to debunk fake news. So in a collected manner and in a systematic manner, it should we should be able to go somewhere and check whether this is fake news.
I think it's about the collection of the data and how open and how timely you are about getting the data out to the people and the interpretation of that data. I think if you look at the management of the crisis in Singapore, one of the strengths I think we've had in the ability to deal with it is the fact that the public communications has been quite open. A number of cases.
You're talking about from the government, from the official sources,
to the media, from the experts to the media. We've had good access to
MOH website.
And questions that we ask do get answered. There have been regular press conferences, and I think that's been a plus. And I think it goes back to a very old idea. I remember a famous quote from Lee Kuan Yew, who said, if we have swine flu in Singapore, we will shout it from the rooftops. Because the worst thing to do is to try to sort of minimize the situation. Then you lose trust and you lose confidence. And I think the willingness to come out and say, this is the situation, these are the numbers, we have a problem, this is how we're going to deal with it, that engenders trust and confidence.
So it's about constant communication and being consistent in that communication.
And being willing to tell it like it is. If the situation has gone for the better, well and good. If it's gone for the worse and you have a problem, better come out and tell everybody about it and be prepared to answer the questions. That's how you will get the public confidence.
But I must say, Singapore was almost an outlier internationally right at the start when they said these harsh rules for spreading false information. And then there were some cases of prosecution.
You're talking about the legislation that was introduced on fake news and falsehoods.
Yes. And they made that very clear as part of the outbreak response. There'll be harsh penalties for spreading false information. And then there were some prosecutions, and these were made very clear that we take this very seriously. So Singapore was really on the front foot. But I wanted to ask June, have you given up on educating people well enough to discern good sources and the truth? Do we have to do it sort of back end?
Yeah, so actually we do actually recommend, what are the material that the students should actually look for. What are the credible newsmaker?
The Straits Times, of course.
And they're experts.
And I also refer them to SCMP and Financial Times. So these are the one I actually recommended.
Well, I think this is a good time to go into some of the questions from the audience. We don't have that much time. There's this particular question, which is interesting. Let me read it out. Scientific studies from experts sometimes makes it difficult to be ascertained by common people. It means to be understood by common people. In my perspective, media also needs to understand scientific content of certain COVID studies because there are some gaps in understanding between the journalists, what the journalists wrote, and the scientists are trying to communicate. How to simplify? How can we simplify the complex COVID-19 studies? And so on, all right? It's a very important point. I mean, something that we talked about, keeping it simple is one of the most difficult things to do when you're dealing with such complexity, and a lot of the medical practitioners, the experts, find it very difficult to simplify. Keeping it simple is different from simplistic. How do we find that way?
So let me, this is not just something that happens by accident. It's part of the communications process, if you like. There's content, and then there's how to deliver it, who to deliver it, and who to deliver it. Most of us that you would use regularly have all done trainings, media trainings. We understand sound bites and all these sort of things that...
And not to introduce jargon to explain jargon.
No, exactly. And I think you'll find that the people that you use regularly have, I guess, developed that skill of explaining things a bit more clearly. But if you just take your average professor out of the lab and say, can you explain this? And he hasn't been trained to do it, then you'll get that scientific explanation, which doesn't cross the bridge necessarily.
Do you feel that you've been able to explain that in your interviews? Explain, the complexities.
I keep getting invited back, so I guess I am.
But it could be that standards are lower to accommodate you.
The rest of a bad bunch.
But
Yes,
I think trying to sort of make a complex issue simple to the average person is part of the challenge. But the other challenge is that things are moving so quickly, and sometimes you get information put out there even before it's peer reviewed, and it goes viral. And I think we've had to sort of rein ourselves in a few times to say, let's be sure we check with the experts to put some context to that information, so that we're not sort of putting information just for the sake of being first or the fastest, but actually helping to put things in perspective. And that's where the experts have helped us sort of interpret it and sort of explain to people what the new findings are. I think that's as important.
Yes. And there's a related question. Given the numerous sources of credible yet differing information, right? Because not everyone who is an expert gives you the same kind of information. I mean, we're talking about the whole debate as to whether to wear a mask or not wear a mask. The expert community didn't have consensus on that until some time later, right? Ministry of Health, WHO, FDA, how can newsrooms decide what is appropriate, what's correct? I mean, how do you all make a decision? Because it must be confounding for editors and journalists as well.
Well, I mean, what's appropriate is the information that the audience needs to make key decisions. So we're guided very much by that. And to the extent that we can sort of bring resources to bear on a subject, interpret, explain, communicate it in a whole range of ways, whether it's visually or graphics, that's what we're trying to do. Because the audience is turning to us for those answers, and that's where we've got to seek the answers out.
Can you give us an example of a situation where you got it wrong and then you had to correct it?
I mean, there have been cases where information is being put out all around the place and we have picked it up. For example, the story about the virus being spread through the air. That was on every platform out there.
Right.
We then went back to check and found that actually the chances of it being spread are very, very small. So we then subsequently updated that story. But unfortunately, the sensational story, the scarier story tends to travel further and
bad news travels much faster.
So our challenge then is how to make sure we get the information to the audience so they don't get into an unnecessary
So
panic.
in this instance, how did you manage it?
We did a follow-up. We did an interpretation. We brought in our Salmas and Ailians to explain. We did an Ask ST session. So you do a whole range of things, and hopefully people then sort of get hoisted all in and see it in context.
And those situations are very critical because if we don't handle it right, it actually erodes trust.
Precisely.
And confidence.
Precisely. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Actually, this should be part of the messaging is that often there isn't a right and a wrong. It's about emphasis and degree. And while you might say, look, airborne is possible, certainly during aerosol generating procedures, but that doesn't mean it's the major form. And now people can start to interpret the bits that they want to get. And the average person on the street should be careful about cherry picking. I want it to be airborne because I want to prove that they're wrong.
Right.
So I'm going to believe it's airborne. Whereas the truth is, it's probably airborne a little bit, but it's not the major mode of transmission.
Right. And so, the earlier point we made about collaborations. So nobody has a monopoly on wisdom. Everybody needs to be willing to suspend disbelief, right? And talk to each other. And I think there's room for tremendous amount of humility as well, in not beating your breast to say, I have the answers, I have the knowledge. I think this is where we need to be humble enough to accept that somebody else may have the knowledge that I don't. So I'm just wondering whether this is an opportunity for media collaboration with one another. I mean, we should be confronting the one enemy, which is COVID. Is there a possibility of SPH, for example, collaborating with others you compete with on this score, like Mothership?
I totally agree with you. You need collaboration, and the effort that the World Editors Forum has been putting into this event and others is all about collaboration. So if you look at the 150 newsrooms that have come together, you will find traditional newsrooms, you will find online newsrooms, you will find social media platforms. And it's all about sharing information. It's all about helping each other get information out. So we've put information into a repository and people can tap into it.
What about within countries? Because the competition is more within jurisdictions, right?
I don't think that's a big issue. We've taken the decision to put all our COVID-19 content outside the paywall as a public service. And we did that with some trepidation because it has commercial implications. But what we found was our subscriptions actually went up.
Yeah.
And that says to me that people do value the information, and then decided that I do need to know, I'm prepared to pay for it. So collaboration does not in any way have a sort of commercial downside. I feel that this is an opportunity to build trust, to build confidence, and to build reputation in that sense.
And also it brings down the possibility of error. When you do collaborate, when there's enough trust between people in the journalistic field to listen to each other and be a check on each other. I think that's what people want to see, that whether I get it from source A or B, there is a certain level of trust that I can expect. A quick question for you from the audience, June. With the advent of digital economy fueled by the pandemic, it is not avoidable that some jobs will become obsolete, which also affects the economy in the long run, right? How do you suggest countries adapt to shift to more digital economy without sacrificing the low-income workers? I know you're not the Minister for Manpower, not yet, but would you want to take a crack at this?
Yeah, that is actually very challenging. I believe that they have to have more exercise, like what I mentioned in actually my opening 3 minutes. Okay, I've actually mentioned that it's very important to have creativity and having the human touch, right? The emotional intelligence. So whatever products and services that they are selling, it's good to actually build this tool into the products and services.
Yeah.
So that is something that even you can train the workers, and you can also be creative, just like the durian seller. You can be a durian seller, you can make loads of money, you can also don't make so much money, right? So if you see some durian seller, they go on live streaming, and it's actually very exciting. They crack really funny jokes, and then they are able to engage the audience, they are able to show their personality. So so we really have to think about how we do things in different ways, how the way we work. So even people showcase in different ways.
And would you say that even here there is a lot more room for collaboration and trust? I mean, one of the things that struck me when I went to Silicon Valley many years back is that people are so willing to share. You go to a cafe, people are so willing to share information with each other, but I didn't see that here. People are so guarded. So from what I'm hearing from you, the durian sellers, for example, the association of durian sellers may have to be formed. Is there an association of durian sellers?
I have no idea.
But again, I think we're coming back to this whole issue. Nobody has the monopoly on wisdom, on intelligence, and we need to work together, not just for COVID, but need to work together going forward. And there needs to be a high level of trust in each other's integrity, that you're not going to steal my stuff. That's a question of honor, So maybe with that, we are running out of time. Maybe with that, I can have a quick 1-minute wrap from each one of you. Could start with you, Dale.
About what?
About your married life. You asked for it.
Look, I think events like this are tremendously useful. I like what you were just talking about, that protectionism doesn't work.
Yeah.
I think this is, it's really the outliers that want to keep things a secret.
Yeah.
If you have good information and you share that with someone else, then the competition should be about who's going to deliver it better, or who's going to deliver it in a more timely way. It doesn't need to be, there's other ways to compete apart from hiding information. What else? I guess I'd like to wish everyone a resilient period. I think this is a time that it can be, you can feel very low. It can test you, but it's a time for individuals and organizations to be proud of how they respond in these tough times, because that's really what sorts people out. And you should be proud of the ability that you've got SPH here. It's empty because you've successfully implemented work from home and you're just as efficient, probably more efficient. So I think there's a lot of good to come out of this, even though it might seem ironic.
Thank you. Warren?
I think your point about collaboration and trust is entirely right, but collaboration and trust has also been seen in this period in the way communities have come together to sort of, organize events to help others in their community. And we've also collaborated with others to do that, because I think newsrooms, apart from informing and explaining to the audience, also have a role to inspire and uplift communities. And in a situation like this, where there is a lot of doom and gloom, the ability of a newsroom to connect with the audience and be part of the community, I think is especially important. So I just want to make a little bit of a plug for the program we're going to show this evening at 8 p.m. on YouTube and our website, because you will see how newsrooms across, not just in Singapore, but across the world, have come together to play that role. Being part of the community, getting the information out, helping to debunk fake news, but also helping to bring people together, inspire and uplift their communities. And that, I think, is how they will build their credibility, their trust in their audience.
Thank you. June?
Actually, digital economy allows for a lot of greater collaborations between individuals, organizations, and even countries. So we can make use of that. And for example, even with my students, I think it is important for me to actually go back and pass them the message that it is actually important when they actually develop a digital solutions, that they have to think about data collections, and also how the whole data framework, and whether there's any ethical concern and issues inside, and whether the data is actually made use of properly.
Thank you, June. So I think it's very, very clear that the key message from this discussion is trust. Trust is important. Once you lose that trust, like anything else in life, it's very hard to regain it. And the best way under the current circumstances to win that trust is, as you said, be part of the community, and that means accountability. And accountability is not about following rules. Accountability and transparency, it's about an attitude that I owe it to you to share the information and to make sure that the information is curated, and I do the due diligence before I share it with you. If we all have that sense of accountability, then the trust will not be submerged. And if trust is not submerged, collaboration will happen naturally. That's the solution to this problem. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Viswa, June, Warren, and Dale. I learned a lot, and I'm sure you guys watching at home, in the office or in a cafe or wherever you are, we all have plenty to ruminate on, not just for the next few hours, maybe for the next few days. Luckily for us, if you want to rewatch this video, it's available online, so you can always, log on again or share the link with your friends. This webinar is, of course, just one of the many specials that we have to commemorate World News Day. As Warren mentioned earlier, the video that he plugged, coming up at 8 p.m. Singapore time in just a couple of hours. I think that's 2.5 hours. My math is right? 2.5 hours. There will be a documentary on how journalists in Asia have coped and adapted through one of the worst pandemics in history. Now, it's called Journalism Through a Pandemic. So this documentary will be hosted by my colleague and multimedia journalist, Dylan Ang. So don't forget to tune into the Straits Times or log on to worldnewsday.org for that. Thank you all once again for joining us here today. Special thanks, of course, to our partners, NYAA, SUSS, and the Singapore Press Club. And last but not least, of course, to all our speakers here with us today or those who joined us remotely. Thank you so much for taking time off your busy schedules. And yes, you can keep the cups.
Why do you think we're here?
Yeah, it's very nice, Mark. Now, once again, my name is Yosem Jo. On behalf of the Straits Times and World Editors Forum, thank you so much. Hope to see you guys again soon. Stay safe and healthy, everyone.
This virus is dangerous. This virus is public enemy number one.
Insane! This is insane!
5 Singaporeans are quarantined on board the beleaguered Diamond Princess cruise ship in Japan.
Whether you call it the coronavirus or COVID-19, the global pandemic undoubtedly dominated news headlines worldwide in 2020. And it's still doing so. Millions have been infected and about 1 million have lost their lives.
It is a very transmissible virus, or rather, I think it is very clever virus. And infected individuals, even without them developing symptoms, they can carry the virus in high quantity and able to transmit the virus very effectively to another human being. And that's the reason why it's spreading so quickly.
In Asia, China recorded the first cases in the region, with Wuhan emerging as the epicenter of the first major outbreak. It quickly escalated worldwide. Cities went into lockdown, social distancing restrictions of varying degrees swiftly imposed. Singapore, for example, introduced the circuit breaker, while neighbouring Malaysia imposed the movement control order. From Sydney, Australia to Sao Paulo in Brazil, we are all feeling the impact of the virus, which has gripped the globe since the start of the year.
This is a devil that everybody should fight.
It matters. Facts matter. Accuracy matters. Objectivity matters. Fairness matters. Balance matters. Accountability matters. Equality matters. History matters. News matters. Your view. Your future. Your world. It matters.